Please head to your class and be seated. Our classes will start in 3 minutes.
Rich? Oh, whoops. All right. We've got a few seconds left, so let's gather in. There we go. Okay. I love this time that we have to visit for a little bit in between the main service and the class time. It is a little bit different, isn't it, than what we've had in the past. There they go. Okay. Bill, would you offer our class, to start our class? I'm sorry for the short notice. You want to pray us into the session? Okay.
To her to share with us, and so we thank you so much for the opportunity that we have to be here. We pray that you would bless this moment and bless our time together in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Bill. Nathan approached me a week or so ago and said that there was an opening for this class session and asked me if I could fill in. And I said, sure. I prayed about it a little bit and then texted him back. And there's something that my daughter Jenna sent to me. It was in the way of a video. It's a 37-minute video that I have watched it several times, and I've shown it to others. And it has dramatically changed my approach in my relationship with myself, with my God, and with others, with my family, with my neighbors. And and the theme for this week is live like Jesus, sacrificial love. And I think one of the biggest things in our life right now that we could sacrifice and that make better use of is our time. Would you agree with that? We are so busy. We are so overloaded with so many stimuli, so many things, and we live at a very fast pace. And this video is about walking at God's pace, which is about 3 miles an hour. And I was shown 3 years ago in 2023 that the Lord wanted me to slow down. And then this spring he told me, just stop and be quiet and let me speak to you. And so he slowed me down even more. And then I get this video, which is about the same thing. So I'm going to open it up and let Rich do his miraculous video thing that he does. And I'm just going to leave it with you with that, because how this video speaks is so much better than I could say anything myself. So with that, let's just enjoy the rest of the time. Thanks.
When you first met Matt, what was your impression?
He meant well, but he didn't know quite what he was doing. I think we helped.
I think they did help. I've been running for most of my life, running through life to get somewhere else. But the thing about running is that you miss things, many things. And if I kept running, I was going to miss everything. 15 years ago, I was finishing seminary. I'd studied history. I'd studied Jesus. I was pretty sure I knew what I was doing. The truth is, I was centuries away and miles away from what Jesus did and what I was supposed to be doing. When I was running, it was easy to stay hidden, to avoid being known. One professor knew this, Eugene Peterson. He said, Matt, if you want to become a pastor, go find a parish. Go find a fishbowl where you can't escape being known and where you lose the fear of being known.
I think what I realized that nobody in America gets listened to very much. I was surprised at how little people had relationships. And all I had to do was just sit there and listen. I'd never read anything on church growth. I just started out going through the neighborhoods, knocking on doors, getting acquainted with people. That's what started what I said to you. I just started looking at this is my parish.
He knew that if I really wanted to walk like Jesus, I had to slow down. I was like, Eugene, I'm in. I'm sold. Where do I go to learn to become this kind of person, this pastor? He smiled and he said, you might have to go further than you think. You might have to leave America. And I thought, that'll never happen. As it happened, my wife and I were invited to study in St. Andrews in Scotland. That's when everything began to change. This is the story of learning to walk instead of run. It's the story of the places and the people who slowed me down. It's the story of the freedom I found and the freedom that found me. So we moved to St. Andrews, began to study, began to fill our heads with more good knowledge. Also began to need some pounds. We needed money, and there was a job for a parish assistant. So I applied, got the job, and showed up to work. My first day on the job, I came to this door, and I said, "Where's my office?" Reverend McDonald said, "Your office?" And I said, "Right, sorry, where's your office?" And he said, "My office?" Then he walked me around to the sign where he pointed to his home telephone number, which was hand-painted. There is no office. So where do I work? Then he pointed down the street and said, "Start walking. Get out into the parish." In Scotland, a parish is a piece of land. It's bordered by rivers, streams, mountain ridges, the ocean's edge. There are stone walls, farmers' fences. There are also roads, but roads that follow ancient walkways, paths people have walked for centuries, from one farm or one house to another. And each house has a name. American houses have numbers. In Scotland, houses have names. It took me a while to understand the difference. It took me a while to even notice. It took walking the parish. When he said start walking, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was always driving my car, going too fast to notice people or the weather or anything. To be in a parish meant to walk. And that was a whole different way of living. The first door I knocked on, I kind of actually did my I was nervous, and that felt friendly. And I learned that I wasn't there to give people the good news. I was there to be a part of their life. With time, questions might come out, but I ended up learning more about them and they about me than me communicating the truth they needed to hear.
People are not used to it being intimate in any verbal way. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. We don't want to be known by name many times because we don't know if they're going to like us. Who can you trust?
My generation, our century, is the tourist generation. We are always on the move, and so we can avoid being known. We avoid our deepest fears of being known. I realized that this avoidance, that this way of moving and always being on the go is totally different than the way Jesus lived in the first century and the way most humans have lived for all of history. So two things were happening at once. I had Eugene calling me to slow down, to become a pastor. I also began reading Tom Wright. And in his writings, I discovered a whole different vision of what life was like in the first century.
We live in such a rootless world. My wife and I have moved house, I think, 16 times in 42 years. It's a sort of complete mirror opposite of that, polar opposite of that. To think of being in that one place is the Benedictine ideal, stabilitas, stability. You are here, you stay here, and you go deeper.
I witnessed this idea of stability firsthand at a nearby abbey where the monks welcomed me on retreat as part of their community.
Stability usually means staying in the same monastery all your life till you die. And that's quite a challenge in a world which chases around all over the place, trying to escape from who you are and where you are. And the secret of stability, or part of stability, is to realize that I'm a sinner, yeah, but before that, I'm a beloved sinner. And so I am loved by God as I am. Very quickly, you see people's faults, at least I do. Look at that guy, no. But to see people's virtues, no, it takes longer. To learn to know them takes time.
And it's not boring. It's only boring if you lack imagination. In fact, it's fascinating because human beings are endlessly fascinating. And you learn by going deeper rather than by the relentless quest for shallow novelty, which is how our culture lives.
The world I was discovering in the writings of Tom Wright exposed me to a whole different way of living, to the way that Jesus lived, especially to the way Jesus earned people's trust, how he risked being known. He lived in a fishbowl where everybody saw everything he did and heard everything he said.
When we read the New Testament, we must relentlessly avoid anachronism. We mustn't imagine that they think exactly like we do, to say, okay, let's go into a world where actually when you walk down the street, you know not only who everybody is, but who their uncles and cousins and aunts were, and who died last year and who got married the year before. That's the world that Jesus lived in. It's a very rich world, it's a very dangerous world. We'd be very vulnerable in that world, and we protect ourselves against that.
To continue my training, we had to move from St. Andrews to Pitlochry. Beautiful village, center of the Highlands. The church is perched on a hill. Malcolm Ramsey's the minister. I preached an awesome sermon one Sunday, but I asked Malcolm what he thought of it. Malcolm said the ending should have come 10 minutes sooner. I was like, Malcolm, that's only a 20-minute sermon. People deserve more on a Sunday. Malcolm said, Matt, people deserve more on a Monday. When you were writing that sermon, did you take time to visit people? Well, no, Malcolm, I was busy writing my sermon. That's when I knew I had to go back into the parish and learn some more names.
One part of speech that's the most important thing in the language is the name. Names are the very basic, life-giving term in language. You say a person's name, and it means something, because there's a relationship then. Until there's a name, there's no relationship. And I had pastors who never knew my name. I was always greeted by my pastors with, how's your soul today? Never my name, just my soul. It always irritated me.
So I started spending less time in my office and more time walking in the parish, meeting people. I knocked on one door, expecting a granny to answer the door, who I could look down upon and talk about the weather with. The man who opened it had deep blue eyes, giant red hair, and I froze. And that's when I met Alan Torrance.
Well, I've done a few good treks, and very often we like to get naked, no in any kind of crude way or to upset people. You can imagine coming through the woods and then you see about 30 lasses and guys, starkers, like, whoa, what's happening here? How you doing? You still say hello.
And sensing my discomfort, he invited me in, made me a cup of tea. We got to talking about why I was there, which I still wasn't sure, but he put me at ease. He made me feel at home.
The way I was brought up was that you had to show hospitality to folk, you know, give them a cup of tea, a biscuit, a meal if they need a meal, you know, so we take great pride in that. You know, we're no rich folk, but to me, you're poor if you can't offer hospitality.
When I left Alan's house, a book fell off the shelf, which I didn't notice. But a minute later, Alan's at the door saying, Matt, look at this.
Check this. That book fell from the shelf, and the book was St. John's Gospel.
So I asked Alan, do you want to read it? He said, not really. But I said, how about if we get together a few other people who don't want to read it, and we ask questions?
We'd established he was going to set up a wee kind of group of men to look specifically at the Bible.
And while we were reading John's Gospel, I had a brilliant point on something theological. Alan said, give me a map. So we gave Alan the map at the back of the Bible, and I remember him realizing that the scale of the map was the same scale as where he lived, and how the distance from Capernaum to the Sea of Galilee was about the distance from Pitlochry to Dunkeld. He got the scale.
Most of the main stories about what Jesus did are in that very small setting of Capernaum, Bethsaida, just the area around the north edge of the Sea of Galilee. And occasionally he gets into a boat, goes over to the other side. But we're still talking about what in our language are small villages, a few hundred inhabitants.
Here was a guy who had never studied the Bible like I had, but he could see it better than I did. He could understand it almost naturally. In his person, in his way of seeing, I was moving to the first century, to the way people thought and saw things.
The law at the time was if you speak and you're speaking, lies, then you will be punished by being stoned to death. If he was coming out with bold statements about, raising people for the dead, making the blind see, he had to have convinced communities that that was true, or else communities would hold him to account, and that he would, have no credibility whatsoever.
Part of Alan's skepticism was assuming Jesus preached in big cities, where he could project one image in public, but be somebody very different in private. You can't do that in a village. When Alan learned that Jesus lived in a village, earning people's trust the hard way, he believed. It wasn't a sermon that changed his mind. It was a map.
So that whole scale of things was crucial to my understanding and my convincing of, the power of Jesus Christ.
Basically, a lot of what happened was in an oral culture where they told stories, where they remembered what had happened. We can get a little glimmer of this from time to time. If a celebrity comes to town, if a famous footballer or rock star, what we have to imagine is a culture which was like that about everything all the time. They just told this stuff, and they knew things as a result in a deeply human way, which we have been in danger of forgetting now for quite some time.
My time in Pitlochry was coming to an end. It was time for me to get ordained. finally to get the collar. I had to find a parish. I thought I had done a good job of learning everything this journey had to teach, learning how to walk, visit. I had only just scratched the surface. There was a place called Methlick, which gave small a whole new meaning.
In Scotland, there's A roads and there's B roads. There are no C roads. But Methlick was at the end of the B999. That is the back of beyond.
As you enter the parish, the road actually takes these massive S-curves, and the sign says, "Slow down now." It's following old boundary lines of farms that were made for walking. So you have to slow down. Then as you drop down into the village, you pass the school on the right, and my kids walk every day. On the left, you pass Mars at Methlick, the tractor dealer. Then you hit the main road. This is Methlick. That's the main road. That's one direction to the church. My house this way is to Methlick Motors, and it's called Methlick Motors, but everyone calls it Duncan's because it's a third generation Duncan shop. Down the way is, well, the bus has stopped, which is kind of big news. He doesn't come very often. There's the pub. There's the grocery store, but everyone calls that French's because it's where Jimmy French opened. And then, well, that's it.
58 years.
58. All in this house?
Yes.
Where were you before this?
Udney.
Udney, aye.
I belong to Udney.
And what do you like about life in a village?
It's not so fast. There's more time to think about things. That's right, I think.
Yeah.
Enjoy living in Methlick. I've been here all my days for the last 82 years, so I was born in Methlick. I was born up at Ward 4, actually. Right at the back is an old building there with it still had an iron roof on it, corrugated iron roof. That's where I was born.
Well, I've been here 44 years. We're the original tenants here.
Well, if I see somebody, I always say hello or good morning, whether I know them or not. So
We usually stop and speak to them, and most of the people, I took them to school. Quite a lot of people I took to school. We've been a bus driver here.
I knew I was going to be away for 2 years doing national service, so that kind of satisfied my outlook, you know, and you come back, and then my father died, so I was in charge of the business since when I was 22. You see, my grandfather bought this shop here from a man named Cobbett Smith, and the agreement was that he could stay in the house so long as he lived. This is back in the 1920s. Well, Cobbett Smith, he lived till he was 94. So,
this year we won the Best Small Communities War Memorial in Scotland. Methlick is renowned throughout Aberdeenshire as being one of the closest villages that everybody does things together, and it's got a very good reputation on that.
This is the older church. The newer one's just over there. And I even can't say the older church because this is actually fairly modern. The church was founded in about 410, same time Rome fell. But we meet over there now because we've got a roof, which is an improvement upon no roof. When I got here, I met Colin Presley. Colin works up at Wardford Farm. He works the fields, he raises sheep. He's the head elder of the church.
Well, we met Matt the first time in Methlick in the pub here around the corner there. We tried to introduce him to a few names. We tried to give him a brief outline of the village and who is who and where was where.
And to introduce me to the parish, he showed me a map. Colin then began to recount for me the names of each person who lived in each home, which also had names. And I thought, he's doing this from memory.
I live in a farm called Ward Ford, which is a name given to a part of the River Iton which was very shallow and used to be able to cross over there with the horse and gig. Other big farms are Auchencrieve, Cato, Auchencrieve, Stephen Mackey, late Stephen Mackey, Balchwindichi, Lee, Haddo. There's just a number of farms around the parish here.
He had all these names memorized, and not just the names, but their stories. He knew the history of the families, the good, the bad, the painful. He just kept describing the people he knew and loved and looked after.
Things are done here correctly, perhaps leisurely, but I think there's a far better quality of life here in this small village where everybody knows everybody and there's a strong community spirit amongst us all. And he was a man from America, young, fast living perhaps, and we thought, well, here we could maybe educate him in the more slower things of life.
So the woman I buried is Ethel Davidson. And she was 92 years old. In talking to her family about how she lived, I found out she never once left Methlick. Someone like Ethel is known in a way I cannot imagine being known. In the beginning, this fishbowl world was a little bit scary. I can't say oppressive, but I was kind of thinking, my goodness, they can see everything I'm doing. When I watched how Colin would listen to me, or to somebody else, or take the time to visit someone, I realized I would need to make a whole lot more time than I used to be present with people.
If you live in the same community with other people, you also have the benefit of seeing God's grace at work in them. There's brother so-and-so. Don't go within 2 miles of him or Krakatoa will look like a penny banger. After 10 years, you can probably get within half a mile of him. After 40 years, you can maybe get within 6 feet of him. Okay, if God can do that with him, maybe he can work with me too.
Now, maybe the slowing down just has to do with more of a habit of being there. But something has to happen. You can't just rush through life. One of the things that technology makes it more difficult for us to do is that there's so much quick information. And if you don't get quick information, you probably think, well, forget about it. Somebody else will figure it out. But nobody's going to figure out somebody's name. You've got to pay attention for that.
Some years ago, there was a theologian who wrote a book called 3 Mile an Hour God, because basically we walk, most humans walk roughly 3 miles an hour. The thought of traveling at only 3 miles an hour fills most of us with horror now. If we are walking, if we are going at 3 miles an hour, we are going at a much more, if you like, humane pace, and there is time to process what we're seeing and what we're experiencing and smelling and knowing. And then the thought that maybe, if we are made in the image of God, maybe this is why we sometimes get so frustrated with God. We want God to go at 60 miles an hour. If I see what I want God to do, I want to do it right now. And in fact, God is walking slowly around Palestine, around Galilee. God is doing what God is doing in God's time. And maybe if we were prepared to slow down a bit, look who's talking, we might actually be able, paradoxically, finally to catch God up.
The idea of slowing down to catch up with God is counterintuitive. It makes no sense. People used to wish each other well with the expression, Godspeed to you, by which they meant, we hope it goes quickly. Maybe Godspeed really is 3 miles per hour. And if we walk with him, we will let him know us and let other people know us too. Colin came by the manse one day, and he knew I wasn't me. And he put it nicely. He said, Matt, you come alive Monday nights at the gatherings when you're talking to people, asking questions. It's a little different on Sundays. And you should risk trying that on a Sunday morning. And when he said I should risk trying it, I felt two things. I felt great excitement and great fear. Fear because if I tried speaking without my notes, I didn't know what would happen, but I feared what would happen. I would freeze, I'd get lost, I'd feel a fool. And that might not be other people's fear, but it's mine. But I also felt great excitement because I thought if I could just talk face to face to people about Scripture, about things they care about, things I care about, this could be a conversation. So I took the risk. I sat in the front row with the congregation all behind me, and I heard two voices. One was saying, go for it. Enjoy this. You got nothing to lose. The other voice said, you have everything to lose. You're a preacher. You're meant to preach a good sermon. You've got people who need to hear it. It was an accusing voice. And I knew which one to trust. One's the devil's, one's God's. One leads to freedom, one leads to guilt. But I could not have won that battle in my brain by myself. I needed help. And that's when I believe the Spirit helped me stand, turn, and face the congregation, who in facing them ceased being the congregation. There was Ann Gardner, Liam, his sister Lexi, all the people I knew who would give me the grace I could not give myself. There was Sandy Forbes, Margaret, Jan, Sue, and Evelyn, Valerie Mitchell, and Granny Wallace, and my family, Madeline, Chapman, Iona, Amy Kate, my wife Julie. I was in a fishbowl, and I was unafraid. This is what Tom Wright is writing about. This is what Alan Torrance can do naturally looking me in the eye. This is what I was now tasting in talking to people who were once strangers, who'd given me grace. This is how Jesus changed the world, and is still changing me.
I'm not sure that we can ever go back and pretend that we like people were 2,000 years ago. For most of us, that's not an option. It seems to me what we have to do is to learn to use wisely the gifts that we now have been given.
Becoming known is a mutual process. It's a giving and receiving, holding nothing back and not saying, I refuse to accept this aspect of you, or I refuse to give this aspect of myself.
You know, some people say, oh, slower means, you know, it's not good. Slow is not good. But sometimes slow is good.
There's no place on this earth that's without potential for holiness. Or maybe the potential for unearthing holiness right where we are, with these people we are with.
13 years ago, I thought I was ready to become a pastor. It's crazy how one conversation with Eugene started this whole journey. I may have helped some people learn how to trust Jesus. They taught me how to walk like Jesus, how to listen like him, how to risk being known, and how to know others. But there's still a long way to go. When you first heard the word parish, what did you think?
I don't know what he was talking about.
I wondered exactly how are you going to translate what you're doing there here?
I think it might be hard. I think Scotland is a lot calmer than America.
I want to slow down, but I'm not really sure how to do that. I have no idea.
This is going to be hard, but everybody knows that. But there are people here who want to try. Together, we're going to figure out what it means in America to live at Godspeed. Hi, my name is Matt. What's your name? Michael, nice to meet you. Stop visiting the parish?
If you want to see this again, I'm sure that we can see it. It'll be archived here for our church, but you can also go on YouTube and see it. For some reason, it comes out, when I pull it up, it comes out with Portuguese subtitles. So I don't know, but you've already seen it once, but there are so many. I got more out of it this time, and I've seen it several times. It's very uplifting, it's very encouraging, it's challenging to me, and it has changed the way I've lived my life with my neighbors, and I find that I want to take more time to get to know my neighbors better, to really see them and acknowledge them, acknowledge all of you when I see you, and I'm with you. And so I hope this has been a blessing to you as much as it was to me. It gave me a lot to think about living the grace and the blessings that are there of living at a slower pace. And so I appreciate all of you for coming and watching it with me again. Thank you. And it's 5 till noon. If anyone has anything they'd like to say about it, that's fine too. So, thank you.